And then I will end with the ultimate worker stream, which is lying in bed and do nothing. Yet I call them the working glamour. So like the working poor, you know this the concept of the working poor, all the people in LA that have to have 3, 4, 5 jobs to survive somehow. So we have here the working glamour. Because they don't lie in bed and do nothing, but they actually work for their enterprise, so to speak. There is something important in the, you know, I could have spoken about many other things about working in bed. There's, for example, a few years later, Steve Wozniak would lie in bed, and one of the founders of Apple Computer, he would lie in bed constantly, and he had this enterprise which is called dial-a-joke. So you would be able to call Steve Wozniak and he would tell you a joke, and you would pay for this. And while doing this, while working in bed, he would invent the first Apple computer. So this is a side step. I'm not speaking about this because this should be might become a different topic, but or a different topic. But it's also interesting that, you know, this computer thing Microsoft comes out of the garage maybe, but Apple was invented in bed. But there is also something else that working in bed, there is also a danger. You know, this utopia of not going to work today and staying in bed and having the cushions above my head, and turns into very fast into depression, because you don't have a work, and you know, what are you doing there? You know? And I think this forgotten image of the very first day of the bed in Amsterdam shows this depression somehow. It also shows, but at the same time, there is also a song of John Lennon that he recorded shortly afterwards with the Beatles still. I could remember this song title.
What we are saying, it's inside.
Yeah, this is the Hilton Hotel in.
No, I say the song.
The song.
What we are saying is this is class.
No. This is not.
They sang inside.
They did sing it in Montreal afterwards. I come to that in a second. So the bedding was done twice. Once in Amsterdam and a second time in Montreal. Why I'm showing this is also that, well, I'm interested in this is because they're doing something with the space. So they come there, they just had honeymoon, and then they just decide to lie in bed and protest for peace, for world peace. So that's their enterprise, world peace, basically. And in this very first thing, they don't know really how to work with the space, and they're I'm a little bit lost because there is also something else that what they are using. Why I'm showing it, this is also because they are using infrastructure, like Holland did use infrastructure that is already there. It's always the Hilton Hotel. So modern style grand hotels, and the Hiltons were built after the Second World War within the Marshall Plan, amongst others along the Iron Curtain, but always with the same concept or the same very kind of clear or readable layout and organization. And then the interior was designed always according to different cultures. So here in Amsterdam, where it was done before, the theme was hunting and hunting and not gathering, but hunting. You know, so everything is very dark wood and all these things. So they would lay there and be it's also an activism or a way of working that is very passive. Yeah? But then they understood that this is not gonna work because nobody knew what to do, what to write about them, because they're not doing. And then they rearranged the space, and it looked like this suddenly. This is something still in Amsterdam that we all know. But there's also something else that I think is interesting, also in order to understand how we are able to intervene in current situations. I think that in this very first moment, even after they had put up these slogans that clearly come out of Yoko Ono's artistic practice. She had this instruction pieces, it's called, very, very famous, where she would have this poetic instructions, close your eyes and die, for example, or whatever, that very short things that and they come certainly out of that. And of course there's John Lennon with his pop background also in there. But the important thing is that still at that moment there's a big confusion what they are actually doing. I think I would say it's a rearrangement of the sensible, of what we know and how we are able to deal with this. And it's also that in that moment Yoko Ono has the same voice as John Lennon, for example. And when you look at all these interviews, and they are doing kind of strange. It's a performance, of course, but it's a performance that has no direction. They are saying, they get asked something and then they answer anything else, and so they are equal partners doing, working for this thing, and they're working. Of course, the Hilton Hotel is not a hotel for them, but it's actually their home, because at the time they only lived in Hilton hotels. So in London they would stay in the Hilton Hotel at there where the speaker's corner is. There's the Hilton Hotel there. So they would only, it's also that here and they didn't, they could have performed the whole thing also in the sound studio of John Lennon or in the gallery or whatever. Galleries were the famous to stage living things at that time. Yeah? No, they performed this thing in their actual living space in a way. So it's also it's merging the living space or the space they are living in or their home, and their workspace is merging in this bed. And then they did repeat this in Montreal a few months later. There, of course, Give Peace a Chance is getting recorded. They didn't want to go to Montreal first, but in New York, John Lennon was not allowed to enter the United States at that moment because he was caught smoking weed at one point. So then they went to the Bahamas. It was too hot there to do this thing. So then they ended up in Montreal, which was a liberal state at that city at that moment. But what happened with this repetition is they wanted to do the same thing again in the States because, of course, they would have a bigger audience. But their action was already embraced by the system. What happened is that they came, and the Canadian Broadcasting Company, the state-owned broadcasting company, would stage the whole thing so they had a TV series, The Way It Is, it was called, with a moderator, and they would kind of script the whole performance in a way that they would say, they would invite guests, and then they would also kind of assign roles to the two partners. So suddenly it was like this, that John Lennon was the hero, the young, very angry hero that wanted to fight for world peace, that is speaking all the time. Then there is this woman that is adoring her husband, but is completely silenced. And then there are these guests. These guests are sometimes it's the El Cap, conservative comic strip drawer from New York, and he is then, of course, he comes in. He's having even this a stiff foot, and then says, hello, I'm the evil, and then and he's really provocating John Lennon, and insulting Yoko Ono in very mean ways, and then of course there is the peace activist. There is Jonathan Leary is coming to the bedside, and so the many other. But it is suddenly it is scripted, and the whole thing is no longer theirs. And I think this is also then something that we have to taking into account when we are trying to design, trying to think of interventions in the city, trying to intervene in our society. Or also even just observing things that, for example, the site in Thessaloniki now, and the one in 20 years or 15 years ago in Berlin. Berlin Mitte, it resembles somehow the same thing, and you could have the similarities, but it's totally different, and it works in a different way. And I think I'm just stopping here now and say thank you for your attention.